Okay, so we're diving into this whole slow productivity thing, right? And like, imagine you land your dream job, you're stoked first day. And your boss is like, your first assignment, go observe this tree for the next 8 months. You'd think they were kidding, right?
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's kind of what happened to John McPhee, this amazing writer. He wasn't just staring at a tree, though. He was really observing it, like letting it fuel his creativity.
Yeah.
And it turned into this award-winning piece, which is wild. But it speaks to this whole idea of slow productivity. Like, what if our obsession with being busy is actually holding us back? I mean, you probably submitted this because you're feeling that pressure too, right? Like, we're supposed to be constantly doing something.
It's true. It's
Yeah.
everywhere you look.
Yeah. We're drowning in productivity tips, new apps, life hacks, the whole shebang, and yet we're still just totally overwhelmed. That's saying we check our email every 6 minutes. It's like we think being busy equals being productive.
Right, like just going through the motions.
But what if that's totally backward?
That's exactly it. It's what Newport calls pseudo-productivity. We're taking this industrial era mindset and slapping it onto knowledge work. It's like imagine a factory churning out the same widget over and over. That's how they measured productivity back then. But now apply that to like writing, coding, designing, things that need creativity, problem solving, actual deep thinking.
Yeah. You can't force those things.
It just doesn't work.
And this whole do more mentality, it even seeps into how big decisions are made. The book talks about this CBS exec totally convinced that longer hours equaled better ratings.
Classic case of mistaking activity for actual productivity.
Right. And it makes you think sometimes it's not about doing more, but doing things differently. Which reminds me of Anthony Zucker, the guy who created CSI, before CSI was even a thing. Zucker spent years chasing that vision, writing, rewriting, pitching, getting rejected. He even started his own production company.
Wow, that's dedication.
It wasn't about just clocking in and out. It was about quality. He was all in on this vision until it actually happened.
That's a great example of what we're talking about. It's that contrast between just grinding away versus focusing on quality over time, even if it means taking a less straightforward path.
Like finding your way up a mountain, sometimes a detour leads to an amazing view.
Exactly.
It's like he was playing the long game, not just rushing for that quick win.
Exactly. And that's what slow productivity is all about. It's not about doing less. It's about working differently.
Right, like choosing quality over just checking things off a list.
Yeah, it's more intentional. It reminds me of the slow food movement.
Oh, yeah. Good food takes time.
Right. It's not just about rushing through a meal. It's about savoring it, enjoying the experience.
And appreciating where it came from, all that.
Exactly. Slow productivity is kind of like that, but for work. It's about understanding our own rhythms, knowing when to push and when to rest.
So it's less about cramming as much as possible into each day.
And more about choosing our tasks, our projects with intention.
Like curating your to-do list instead of letting it run wild.
Exactly. It boils down to two core principles. First, doing fewer things, but doing them really well.
So saying no more often.
It's tough, but yeah, it's about saying yes to the things that truly matter.
And what's the second principle?
It's about working at a natural pace, resisting that always-on mentality.
Oh, giving ourselves permission to actually unplug.
It's essential we're not machines. We need time to think, to process, to let ideas simmer.
Like that image of a pressure cooker. You can't just keep cranking up the heat.
Sometimes you gotta let things simmer a while.
I feel like we often forget that, especially when we think about successful people, we picture them like constantly churning out amazing work like Jane Austen.
Yeah.
You'd think she was just effortlessly writing masterpieces, right?
I always thought that about her.
But it turns out she actually struggled to write when her life was super busy. All the chores, the social obligations, it really got in the way.
Interesting. So what changed for her?
It was only when she carved out dedicated time, working slowly and deliberately.
Like giving herself permission to focus.
Exactly. And that's when her real genius came through.
It makes you wonder what we could achieve if we gave ourselves that same permission.
Right. It's not about rushing. It's about allowing quality to emerge at its own pace. Which brings us to the big question, how do we actually apply this slow productivity stuff?
Right, because it sounds great in theory.
It's easy to talk about slowing down, but actually doing it, it's a whole other story.
And thankfully, Newport gives us some concrete strategies to actually use this stuff.
He doesn't just leave us hanging with these big ideas.
Exactly. He gives us the tools to put them into practice. And one of the most useful, limit the big, contain the small.
Limit the big, contain the small.
Wow.
It's catchy, I'll give him that.
Right, but it really works. Limiting the big means being picky about the projects you take on.
So like saying no to things even if they sound kind of cool?
Exactly. It's about focusing your energy on the things that truly align with your goals.
Even if it means disappointing someone. That's tough.
It can be. But remember, every time you say yes to one thing, you're saying no to something else.
So you really got to weigh your priorities.
And that's how you limit the big. Then you move on to containing the small.
Okay, so how do we wrangle all those little daily tasks? The emails, the meetings.
Those can be real productivity killers. One great strategy is using office hours for your inbox.
Oh, I read about that. Instead of checking email constantly, you have set times to deal with it.
Right, it's a
Yeah.
game changer. You batch process all those messages, get them out of the way.
And it stops them from hijacking your whole day.
Exactly. You create that mental space to focus on the big stuff.
It's like building a fortress around your most important work.
I like that analogy.
And you know who was great at saying no? Richard Feynman.
The physicist.
Yeah. He was crazy brilliant, but super protective of his time. He would politely decline all sorts of requests if they didn't fit with his priorities.
So he was limiting the big without even realizing it.
Exactly. He knew that saying no to some things meant saying yes to the things that really mattered.
It's a good reminder for all of us.
It really is. And, you know, at the end of the day, this whole productivity thing is about doing good work, work that we're proud of.
Absolutely. Work that makes a difference.
And I don't know about you, but whenever I rush something, the quality always suffers.
100%. It's like trying to bake a cake in half the time. It just doesn't turn out as good.
It's going to be rushed and uneven
Exactly. Newport says that slowing down can actually lead to breakthroughs.
because you have the space to actually think things through.
Right. He uses the example of Hamilton, the musical.
Talk about a masterpiece.
Lin-Manuel Miranda didn't create that overnight. He spent years developing it.
Really? Wow.
It was a slow and deliberate process, but look at the result.
It's like that saying, anything worth doing is worth doing well.
And sometimes, well, takes time. It's about respecting the process, trusting that creativity needs space to breathe,
Like that idea of mise en place in cooking.
where you prep everything before you start.
Yeah. It seems like an extra step, but it makes such a difference.
Totally. And speaking of trusting the process, remember singer-songwriter Jewel?
Oh, yeah. Great voice.
She was offered a $1 million record deal, but the label wanted to change her sound.
$1 million. What did she do?
She walked away. She didn't want to compromise her artistic vision.
That's wild.
It paid off, though. Her next album went triple platinum.
Wow. Good for her.
It shows that staying true to your vision, even when it's tough, can lead to amazing things.
So it's like McPhee and his tree Zucker and CSI, Austin finding her voice.
And Jewel betting on herself. They all embraced the slow and steady approach.
It's inspiring, right? It's like they're giving us permission to slow down, too.
It's not about being lazy. It's about being intentional. It's about recognizing that we do our best work when we're not constantly rushing.
When we give ourselves the time and space to really think deeply.
Exactly. So if you're feeling that pressure to do more faster, remember these stories.
Remember that sometimes the most productive thing you can do is slow down.
Take a breath, reassess, and then get back to work, but at your own pace.
On that note, I think we've earned a little slowness ourselves.
I'm right there with you.
So until next time, take care, everyone.